our first conference finals. Couldn't have done it without him. Last year, where we dealt with a lot of injuries, Reggie put on a uniform every single night. And when you look over the last 3 years, he's actually played the third most games of any Clipper. Have a ton of respect for Reggie, unbelievable spirit. When we were down 0-2 in both playoff series, he didn't flinch. He had a great attitude about him. He's a terrific person, and he's a great story of sometimes when you think it could be over, you get a chance, you get some people who believe in you, and he took full advantage of it. So it's sad to see Reggie go. Luke, to see his growth and development from the time we traded him, you saw his confidence grow. He's a whole lot more than just an elite shooter. He's a really good connector on the basketball court. He can dribble, pass, and shoot. It was great to see his development as a non-ball defender with each year. Here he got better, consummate pro, and very, very thankful for what Luke means to the organization. John, who's one of the best point guards of his generation, very, very professional, extremely competitive, handled a different role in a first-class professional way, and have a ton of respect for John, both what he's done and also what he is, and he still has a lot of basketball left in him. So with that, I open it up to questions.
Can you give me, with the new players coming in, how do you see them fitting in? What are your expectations for the 3 new guys coming in?
Yeah, I think when you go into the deadline, before you even put players' names to anything, you look at what are the goals and objectives of the deadline, and to make sure you're staying within those guardrails. And we're really, really excited with the deadline. Is as hard as it is to trade players, your job is to get the team better. So one of the first objectives we had is we wanted to enhance our playoff rotation, and with two-way play, with someone who can also pass, dribble, and shoot and be switchable. The second thing we wanted to do was consolidate our guards. It was a challenge. Just we had so many talented guards that it's tough not to play them all, but yet they didn't quite all fit together just because they shared some of the same strengths, whereas they also shared some of the same deficiencies. The third thing we wanted to do was just address some positional needs. And the fourth thing we wanted to do was to add some youth to the roster. We're one of the older teams in the league, and we want to continue to inject really good young talent. And then the fifth thing we wanted to achieve was we wanted to add some flexibility. So we were really, really happy first within those guidelines. We feel like we've been fortunate that we checked all those boxes. So with each guy, with Eric Gordon, who's no stranger to Clipper fans, Eric's proven to be able to play both on and off the ball. He's not a point guard, but he can initiate an offense. He can run pick and roll. He can make all the different passes out of pick and roll. But one of the biggest benefits he does is off the ball. He provides as much spacing as any player in the league. He's not a 3-point shooter. He's a 4-point shooter. And so what happens is, and he's used to playing with stars, is if you really study how his defender will be next to him, he's very rarely at the nail if Eric's in the slot. He's going to be hugging it. It just gives wider gaps to attack. He also, as you saw in the game when we played him, if you remember, I don't know what it was, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, he's an excellent downhill attacker, very similar to Norm in that regard. And we struggle at times when, we can get at times a little bit too jump shot, leaning, and he gives us another guy who can get his head on the rim. He's an efficient attacker. He understands how to punish switches. So we think he can carry a really good load for us both on and off the ball. And then defensively, just because of his body type and length, he's able to guard up. He's able to switch up. Houston, when they were at their best with those teams that competed with Golden State, they were one of the better switching teams in the league. And they were able to do it with Eric on the floor, because he's able to guard bigger players. And we kind of built our team around that concept, and especially in the playoffs where switching becomes so much more prevalent than drop pick and roll defense. We think he's a really, really good fit in that. And he's got playoff experience. He's playing in a number of big games, so we think Eric will fit in seamlessly. With Mason, we obviously needed to address, the big position behind Zoo. Mason's had a career year. His energy, it's a little bit, we saw it last year with Isaiah, where we're able to take advantage of his passing. I don't know how many, well, some of you guys have followed us for a long time, but if you remember the playoff series when he was with Portland, and they had, with CJ and Dame, we blitzed them literally every catch because they had Mo Harkless on one wing, Aminu on the other, and yet Mason was the one who picked us apart. He's able to, he can play in that pocket, in that window, and attack and make plays. So, again, looking towards the playoffs with Kawhi and PG, they're going to get blitz. We wanted to make sure we had another playmaker at that size. It also helps us because we don't have the pure point guard, another guy who can pass the ball like we saw with Isaiah last year. Mason's a very, very good runner. The other thing we like about Mason, I think it's important in the playoffs, that you're able to execute different pick and roll coverages. And with Mason, he can get up with Charlotte on the side. They ice to a blitz, basically a trap. They take away the middle, and he's got good active feet. He slides well laterally. Obviously, I think those who follow Charlotte know he's a very improved free throw shooter, directly correlated to starting to shoot it left-handed. So to his credit, and he's a super high character guy. I got an opportunity to meet him when he was and spend some time with him when he was a rookie. We had Marshall Plumlee, his brother, here in our G League program. So we're really, really excited to welcome Mason. And then Bones, Busy Bones. We kind of fell in love with Bones during the draft process a couple years ago. He has an enigmatic personality. I think he's going to be a fan favorite. He plays a game that's an exciting game. He forces teammates to play fast. He pushes the ball. He's a deep shot taker and maker. He's a really good shooter off the dribble. And he's a whole lot more than just a scorer. If you really break down his game, he's a very, very good passer off pick and roll, and he's a very, very good left-hand passer. He can make all the reads, all the passes. He plays with a great energy to him, and we're really, really excited to add someone like Bones, who made, I think he was second-team All-Rookie last year. He had some some different things for him this year where things didn't go away, but that's why he was available. So we're super, super excited with all three guys.
El, you guys came in with championship expectations. How does this group kind of complement Kawhi and PG better as far as trying to reach that goal? And also, do you feel like the lack of a true point guard might be something you might be a little concerned about in the playoffs?
Well, I think the thing it's a great question. And look, we obviously were in conversations with quote unquote true point guards, and I think when you look at teams, and even if you think about the team we're playing tonight, like who's the point guard for the Bucks? Well, you'd say Drew Holiday. For years, people said, Drew Holiday's an all-star, but is he a point guard? You look at the Warriors, like who's the point guard for the Warriors? Is it Steph Curry or is it Draymond Green? For the Celtics, Marcus Smart is the point guard. So I guess my point is, you play through your best players, and if there was a point guard that could be in our top 8 or 9, like we looked at those guys. Invariably, what's important is we need someone, whether they're a point guard or not, is someone who won't be played off the floor defensively, someone who can share some of the ball handling responsibilities, but yet not be so ball dominant that the ball's going to be in Kawhi and PG's hands 60% of the time. So it's a delicate balance. So I think with it is, regardless point guard or not, is getting guys who they got to be able to shoot, because in the playoffs where like the stars, they're not going to have a lot of space. So we wanted to check that box with Eric. The ability to drive a closeout, because you're going to see a lot of rotations when people put 2 on the ball. And then on the other end, can you guard multiple positions? And so I think whether point guard or not point guard, like we wanted to get a player like that. Because if we didn't get a player like that, whether it was quote unquote a pure point or just a guard, we would have just stayed status quo. And the league has a ton of great point guards. The thing is, it comes down to what's the definition. The prototypical definition, there aren't a lot of those guys left. A lot of these guys are scorers first that put 2 on the ball, create an advantage, then move it. We built our team around Kawhi and PG, and then surround them with complementary pieces. So I think you look at everything, you try to explore everything, and it's also a competitive trade market. You don't just always get the perfect thing, but you look, okay, how can we get the team better? So I think, and this is not any insinuation on the roster we had prior, is I think we got better. I think subtly, with some of the subtle changes we made, we've improved. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to all our players' availability, the ability to play well together, and to completely buy into what T. Lue needs them to do.
What do you have an open roster spot? Just sort of how do you view whether you'll fill that in the buyout market? Just how do you view sort of that opening?
Yeah, I'll sit down with T. Lue and just kind of evaluate where we're at. I think, my instinct is to kind of let's kind of take shape. Let's see what this looks like. See how it fits. We only have maybe 5-6 games before the buyout market. Guys have to be bought out by or waived prior to March 1. But just kind of, I'd like to let this marinate a little bit. But I'll sit with Ty and see what he thinks, and we'll kind of proceed from there.
I just want to ask, with everything that's happened in the West, Dallas made their move. You saw what that looked like Wednesday night partially. Obviously, Phoenix picked up Kevin Durant. They did that this week. Phoenix, we won't see Kevin either, but they obviously made some moves. A lot of teams made moves, but obviously those are the two that probably are at the top of the list. How did that, if it did at all, affect how you looked at trying to upgrade this roster this week?
Yeah, it didn't have any impact. And someone asked me, it wasn't an interview, but asked the same question to me, is, you have to run your own race, and you have to do what's best for your group. Each team has their players, and they have a set of their tools in terms of what they have draft capital. Obviously Phoenix made a huge splash move, getting one of the great players to have played this game. We did it in 2019. You don't have an unlimited treasure chest. So I think you do what's best for your group. So for us, like I said, that's why we always we hold ourselves accountable with what are the goals and objectives that we're trying to get done way ahead of the trade deadline, so you don't get that deal heat that, oh my goodness, Dallas did this, or another team did that. I think you have to run your own race. You have to do what's best for your group. And our commitment, to Steve, to our players, to our staff, is to try to give them the best chance we can at competing for a championship year in and year out.
If I may, just a quick follow-up. You mentioned flexibility. What does that mean specifically for the team?
Well, I don't know. I mean, flexibility obviously creates optionality. What it means, I guess only time will tell.
Would you be willing to share just a little bit behind the scenes? Because it seemed like the floodgates just opened up. As a fan, you didn't want to go to sleep Wednesday night because the phone was blowing up. Behind the scenes, what was it like for you? You had your plan. You thought already what when you were going to pull the trigger on your deals.
Yeah.
Just kind of curious.
Yeah. So you started way in advance in the sense of, you establish some goals and objectives, and then you establish some player targets in terms of what your needs are and who would best fit it. And those dialogues start, it's months of dialogues, and because you have to, in order for a deal to get done, is both teams' interests, those circles have to intersect. And it has to be a win-win for both sides, and it has to make sense for both teams. In order to be able to create those ideas, you need to really have really good relationships with the other teams to understand what exactly are their needs. What are they trying to get? What are they trying to achieve by the deadline? And then you just start doing some dot connecting. And very similar to the draft, you have a order of where you're going to go, and then you have to understand there's a timing factor. And if there's not enough traction on one deal, or you just don't see it happening, you have to quickly pivot. And then the thing is, what becomes challenging, and I give an unbelievable amount of credit, we have a terrific front office group. they do all this despite me. I mean, they just wake me up at the end like, look, this is who we got, and oh, good. But no, we really have a great group with Michael Winger, Trent Rennan, Mark Hughes, Lee Jenkins, our entire strategy group, Judd Winton, Matt Elijah, Greg Pyman, and then so many people behind the scenes, our director of pro scouting, John Lawyer. So it's a collective effort of everyone kind of connecting dots to be able to put these multi-team trades together. And so we were very, very fortunate. I mean, at 3 in the morning, I don't even know the days, but like, we really didn't look like anything was going to be, we were able to execute anything. And then even as, I'd say, as late at 8:30 in the morning, 9 in the morning, like that didn't look, and then things start to come together, and you have to move quickly. But you're not able to be nimble and fast if you don't have a plan. And it's very process driven, because again, it's very easy to get deal heat, and you have to be disciplined. And especially in our situation where we don't have the full treasure chest, and you have to understand how to manage your assets, because you're consistently trying to get better, but you can't be so nearsighted that you make some foolish decisions.
That's what I feel like obviously point guard is an important role, especially for a team with the wing stardom that you guys have. And Ty has talked about wanting to use a point guard, a traditional point guard, quote unquote. This roster doesn't necessarily have that, so I'm curious. It's maybe bones, but what were the, I guess, collective conversations going on about having that true point guard out there? Because Ty said, he likes that traditional point guard versus not having one, because I think right now you guys don't really have one.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, you look at the, I guess, quote, true point guards, how many of them were traded? So I think there were 2, right? Other teams also value the position. So I think what you do is, if you're not in a position to obtain them, it's not for a lack of trying. You ultimately then have to, okay, how can I get the team better if I can't get this position? Because I think the playoffs are a great revealer, in that you could get a backup point guard or a 2.5 or a third point guard who may have the skill sets, because a point guard in today's day is completely different than what it was 10 years ago. I mean, other than maybe a couple teams, everyone basically runs the same stuff. There's not the intricate, complicated patterns being run as much these days, and it's like scoring's up. It's a free-flowing game. So I guess the question is, would you rather have a backup point guard who has limitations in other areas, or would you rather have a better player who's going to be in your top 8? Now, the ideal thing is you have that, whether it's a point guard or whatever position, that can do both. But if you can't acquire that guy, like, you got to find other ways to do it. And I guess even my point earlier, when you really study the league, like, there's the term point guard is a very, very vague term. So to me, is what you do is you always build your team around your best players and get complementary skill sets. Because if, let's say, we had a ball dominant point guard who couldn't, who had other limitations, well, how does that impact your stars? So I think it's like Ty and I dialogue every day, and we try to do everything in our power to be able to get him what he needs. And like in any relationship, if those guys aren't available, or they're not being traded, or another team gets them, well, you gotta pivot. You can't just say, like that. No, that's the job, and the job is you have to be creative in different ways. And so it's an unbelievable process, because you just gotta be very creative and figure things out together.
Thanks, Al.
My pleasure. You guys have a great night.
Let's get ready for HoopJab.